Welcome to the Third Apron podcast. I am Sam Quinn. You might be a little bit confused if you're a longtime listener of this podcast. It's not that long-lived a podcast, but if you're a frequent listener of this podcast, obviously Yossi Gozlan is normally the person talking in this slot. Well, Yossi's here, but we have a bit of an announcement to make. Moving forward, starting this season, I will be co-hosting the Third Apron podcast with Yossi Gozlan. We have been doing podcasts together in some fashion now. It's been 5 years, right, of us guesting on one another's shows.
Yeah. Also, for those of you who want the true lore, if you're unclear, Sam was hosting a show called Who Says No, and I'm allegedly the most frequent guest on that show. Is that correct?
Certainly the most frequent guest, unofficial third host, I think was what we came up with.
Yeah, and those were some great times. We had an amazing time always podcasting together. Then life happened. But now we reconnected over the past year. Having you on my show again has been a lot of fun, and this has been something I'm sure if you've been listening to the show, you've kind of been thinking, well, why doesn't Sam co-host? Some of you have been sending me DMs, commenting on videos on the episode. Hey, why don't you let Sam co-host? Well, I'm finally, yeah, this was brewing for a while, and Sam's finally here, and I can't imagine continuing this without him. I just have so much fun chatting basketball with him, and he will be a co-host now. So there will be times, including this episode, where he's going to take the reins. And other news going on, I hinted at this in our last episode, but I have moved, so I'm just going to put the camera just on me, so you're not shown right now. But I have moved. This is my office, and it's still a work in progress. I've got this green screen I've had that when I had my 2-bedroom apartment, it didn't really work. I need more space apparently to use it, so hopefully this works. So maybe there's ways I can implement that. But as you can see, I've got a lot of wall over here, and I plan on decorating it. I've got a lot of NBA memorabilia, just to get an idea of what I've got brewing. I have all these flags for teams. I counted 24 of them. These are from 2004. 2006. I'm sorry. When I had my bar mitzvah, my theme was NBA teams. So we had these for each table. So I've got a lot of different teams, including one that might be returning soon. So I don't know if I don't think I'll put all 24, but just something. I've got some, I don't know where they are right now. I've got some, Funko Pops, I think. I got a Magic Johnson one, Michael Jordan one lying around. And then the cool things I got going on, got some jerseys. I've got a lot of jerseys. Again, same thing. I don't know how much space I'll have, but here's a favorite of mine. Do you know who this is, Sam? What? Look.
Who is that? That 11 or 77? I can't tell. I was like, oh, is that? Yeah, I'm bad with numbers.
My dad and I flew to Dallas in 2011 to watch the finals. So I bought this jersey. I've got a lot of other.
Have we both attended NBA Finals games in Dallas as fans
at the same time?
No, I went in 2006.
I went 2011 when they beat the Heat.
That's kind of wild because neither of us are from Dallas.
Yeah, no, I just graduated high school, and we're thinking let's celebrate. Let's go watch the Mavs hopefully beat the Heat, who at the time was the biggest villains. I've got a lot of other ones. I got a Rubio jersey, Wolves. I've got a lot of different ones. I've got Paul Pierce. He's been in the news recently. So we'll see how many I end up putting, but I've got a lot of stuff. So I'll have a more animated backdrop once I'm really fully settled in. But just wanted to share that stuff. And I'm really excited for the season. Third Apron podcast is going to be a lot of fun. Sam, I'll kick it off to you. This episode this was something that you've been wanting to do, and you put it together. Anything else you want to add before we get to it?
I really just want to ask if it was intentional that the first flag you showed us was Dallas because
Oh,
of Cooper.
it was just in order. That just the order it was. uh, yeah. So what I got? New Jersey Nets. Uh, trying to think. Like I don't have 24 teams, so I don't know I don't remember who were the worst ones
Maybe
at the
there's a
time. So
Bobcats in there, a lot of defunct teams and cities and whatnot and logos.
So that's what I was gonna say. There's only 24 teams, so we didn't have. I guess we didn't have the worst of the worst, which means no Charlotte. 2006.
Oh,
Who were the worst teams? Was it
the
Toronto
Kings
that
were good
bad?
at that point. The Kings might
Nope.
even be in there.
I've got a Toronto in here. Pistons, Lakers, Knicks. Sure, they were pretty bad in 2006. Well, anyways, we'll see how
2006,
many.
that was the Knicks gave LaMarcus Aldridge to the Bulls, I think, or the number 2 pick that became LaMarcus Aldridge, who then obviously went to Portland. But
Yeah.
so, in honor of us, I guess officially resuscitating the old Who Says No partnership, an episode that I did on Who Says No that I wanted to make a recurring thing every year was something that I call the Tradies Awards, which are awards for the trades that have taken place in the last year. Obviously, Who Says No no longer exists, but Yossi and I are podcasting again, so we're bringing those back. These awards will cover all trades between the 2024 offseason and the 2025 trade deadline. The idea is to cover trades that affected the 2024-25 season. Usually, hopefully, if we're doing this for a long time, we'll be able to do this in July, August, right when the dust is settling on the season. For now, obviously, we're launching late, so we're doing this a week before the season. A nice opportunity for us to look back on the transactions that were ahead of the season that we're about to have. So, we have 8 categories. I have a winner, a second place, and a third place choice for each of them. And Yossi will have his own honorable mentions as well, potentially some traits that he wants to nominate. We're going to start smaller and then work our way up to the bigger ones. So, our first award, most mutually beneficial trade of the year. I think we had a couple of disagreements on this. I'll start putting out mine and then we'll get into yours when we're through with those. Third place, DeAndre Hunter to the Cavs. Very, very straightforward. Helps them clear, or it helps the Cavs get some front court depth that they needed. Obviously, they had a bunch of injuries in the playoffs. It didn't work out, but they got a very good player for a very minimal price. They clearly upgraded in terms of talent. The Hawks clear out the George Niang contract. That helps them do everything that they're going to do over the offseason. Wait, no, excuse me. They clear out, sorry, they get George Niang back, but they clear out the Hunter contract, which helps them do everything that they're going to do this offseason, getting Kristaps Porzingis, getting Luke Kennard, getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That was not on your list, right, Yossi?
So I do think it is a mutually beneficial one, especially with the Hawks. I think he's been really great for the Cavs. Even if he doesn't start, he's been closing a lot at times. So even though he's making starter level money, if he continues playing at this rate, it's still a good trade for the Cavs. I like it a little more for the Hawks, but I still think I do agree it is pretty even. The other point is that up until last season, DeAndre Hunter's value was trending towards negative, maybe neutral at best because of his contract. And then last season, he was having a career year for the Hawks. So I remember the trade rumors kind of suggesting the Hawks would be lucky if they can even just get off Hunter's contract. And they were able to get some second round picks, some first round pick swaps. So they got actually positive value for him. So worked out really well for the Hawks. As you just pointed out, helped them clear a lot more flexibility, setting the table for the moves that they ended up doing this summer. So I do think it is mutually beneficial. Let's keep going on your list, and then I could give some honorable mentions.
Second place, this was a trade that's going to come up in a couple of places. I think you even have it for some of the bigger ones. Denny Avdia to the Portland Trailblazers. That is Denny Avdia for the pick that became Bub Carrington, number 14 overall, and then a 2028 first round pick, or excuse me, 2029 first round pick. That is the second best between Milwaukee, Portland, and Boston. So that's a potentially pretty interesting pick. Obviously, the upside is muted by virtue of it being the second best pick and not the best pick. But I think both teams are very, very happy with how that worked out. Bub Carrington had a nice rookie year for Washington. That pick is potentially valuable, but Denny on one of the best contracts in the NBA. Portland trying to be competitive now. He had a bit of a breakout at the end of last season. Very, very good trade for both sides.
Right. So Denny, he finally started to be really impactful in that last season with Washington. But even then, after seeing that, I don't think even Portland imagined that he would have had the season he just did, where I still have a hard time seeing him become an all-star because the West is so loaded, but he's going to get strong consideration going forward. And you mentioned that contract, such a steal, where honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Portland maybe tries to renegotiate it or like a year early. That's something I'm going to write about on the Substack. But as right now, like if it feels like for some people, the Blazers probably won that deal because how good Denny was, and we still need to see a little more from Bub. I think that eventually it will be definitively like a mutually beneficial trade, like a win-win. It'll just we still need to see a little bit more from Bub. So for those not feeling it's beneficial right now, I do think it will get there eventually. But also that pick, a lot of variance with that pick. So you mentioned it's the second most favorable between three teams, Portland, Boston, Milwaukee. I would imagine Boston's going to be pretty good in 2029. Portland should be solid, but maybe the Bucks, with all the news going on with Giannis, when you just ignore Giannis from the equation, this Bucks team is not inspiring at all. That's putting it nicely. I think that should be a pretty solid pick. Maybe not necessarily a high lottery one, but maybe late lottery, maybe something in the mid-teens. I do think it is pretty beneficial trade.
Yeah, you bring up Denny as a possible all-star candidate. I think he's more of a star in his role type of player. I think now that he's making his threes, he just does a little bit of everything. Even that doesn't feel totally accurate. He does like a medium amount of everything. Like very good defender, but not like all defense caliber. Good playmaker, not a primary ball handler. Now he's making his threes. Just somebody that you can slot onto any team. He's going to be one of these guys, if Portland doesn't improve, that we're going to be putting in trade rumors forever. Like we're looking for a new Alex Caruso, that star role player on a very cheap contract that good teams are going to be trying to trade for. So if Portland doesn't, take that leap this year, he's going to be one of those guys that's in all those rumors. But I'm
it sounds
pretty
like
bullish.
Without saying any names, sounds like you were describing Mikal Bridges for a second, which
right? Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, like let's say, and this is what I do want to write about eventually, but if the Blazers, let's say they do extend Shaedon Sharpe, they'll have they could still have some cap space next summer, but eventually they'll probably hope that Scoot does well enough that they'll want to extend him, where they're not really going to have another big move to make besides keeping their own guys. What if you can renegotiate Denny and get him to like Mikal Bridges type money, where his next contract going to pay him like, what is it, 35, 40 million a year, something like that? Then he's still that type of guy that you just described, like below max money for an amazing starter. I don't know. What do you think about that possibility?
So he'll have 2 cheap years left at the end of this year, right? He currently has 3 left.
He's got 2 after this. And I don't think we've ever seen a player get renegotiated with an additional year on his contract. There's nothing in the rules that say you can't do that. What if I'm saying, what if the Blazers do that now to maybe get him on a Mikal Bridges like type contract, like what Mikal Bridges just extended to? So
I think you could even get him for less because you have those multiple years of control left. We saw this with Herb Jones, where a below market contract, even if it's below market because it's restricted for some reason, tends to beget another below market contract because the restrictions on the first one limit how much you can extend for in the second one. So if he's extending with multiple years left, even on a renegotiation, I feel like you probably wind up getting him for a pretty good value. And since you already have multiple years on that, now you're talking about keeping him in place for a long time and a reasonable amount of money. I think that's a good idea if you're not doing anything else with your cap space. So Denny Avdia, that is a trade that's going to come up in a couple more categories. The winner of this one feels pretty obvious. We don't really have a definitive winner on this yet, but both sides obviously came out of it pretty happy last year, which was Karl Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and the first round pick that became Joan Behringer. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I am pretty excited about him. He looked good at Summer League. I think he's somebody who could like actually factor meaningfully into the evaluation of this trade in a few years, especially because Minnesota now has three very expensive big men since they've re-signed Julius Randle and Naz Reid on these big long-term contracts. Having the one on the rookie scale and Behringer, I gotta learn how to pronounce it, is going to be useful if you do want to trade one of the expensive ones, cough Rudy Gobert, cough, just because he's the oldest and the one with he's kind of on a time bomb contract a little bit. He did go down from his supermax number on this extension, but 3 years at his age does get kind of dicey if you do want to kind of take not a gap year, but like let's take a step back, focus on our youth and come back strong in 27, 28. Something to consider. But that trade worked out, I think, as both teams wanted it to. It helped Minnesota keep Naz Reid. It obviously gave the Knicks a center when they didn't have one when Mitchell Robinson was hurt and they lost Isaiah Hartenstein. I think both teams are pretty happy with where they are.
I think there's a pretty clear winner. The Charlotte
Okay.
Hornets. They were in that trade. Come on, Sam. Using your full room mid-level, get 3 seconds. Nah. I mean, so that was pretty good value for them. So when thinking about, it is still a little too early to say if there will be a definitive winner because, I mean, both teams have already had such immense success heading into it. The biggest thing with Cat is, while he's probably still, his contract's probably still towards like the negative end because of his defensive liability. But for the Knicks to get him for the price they gave up, Randall DiVincenzo won first, like just outside the lottery, I still think that's really great value, despite the contract for the type of player he is. Because before, I was very down on the Wolves' decision to trade for Rudy Gobert and give Towns that supermax contract in conjunction. I didn't think, I was like one of the many doubters who did not think the Wolves would go very far. And after the 2024 playoffs, when they went to the conference finals, especially the way Cat played, not completely, but really changed my mind. I became a lot more positive towards him. So obviously the Wolves, they still made the conference finals without him. Randall's played a lot better than I imagined. If you've listened to enough of me, I've been more skeptical of Randall and how he could fit on other teams with on a lesser role, but he's played much better than I imagined. It's all worked out. I still feel like the Wolves' ceiling though is lower as a result of this trade. I think having Cat, the best shooting big man in the league, like he literally like won them. I remember that game he won them. The only game they beat the Mavs in the conference final was because of Cat. And yeah, it is a lot of money for him at that position, but I think the Knicks now, they're going to try to emulate a little bit of what the Wolves did, playing him with a defensive minded center. So I feel like in the long run, I think the Knicks might be slight winners of this trade. That's just my prediction, but just 1 year out of this, arguably a win-win trade. Most people would agree this was like one of the most mutual beneficial trades of the past few years.
Is it still mutual if it's two teams benefiting? Because it's really a win-win-win. You did bring up Charlotte. You also brought up the Towns contract, which I think is interesting. We're going to get to this in a later category. I do think if the Knicks, like, obviously we're looking ahead here. I'm looking at these Giannis rumors and I'm saying, like, man, imagine if you could get 2 good years out of Cat and then trade him in a Giannis deal and get out from the bad years on the contract that are eventually coming and the inevitable extension. So obviously there are more chapters of this trade to be written, but when both sides make the conference finals, you feel pretty good about a deal.
Well, here's the thing. So Cat signed that Supermax in 2022. So I think he's got that player option for 27, 28. So I think he's got 2 years left and then the player option, I think. What if Towns declines that player option and does kind of like a Rudy Gobert type contract, takes a little bit less and then does longer years at that lesser amount. I don't know how much less. This is something I believe they can agree to now. Yeah, Cat's still extension eligible through until the season starts. I think that's something that gets more revisited maybe next year or the one after. But like if he declines that $60 million player option, takes it at a significant discount and adds more years, how would you feel about that trade after?
I'd
Would
feel
that
better about it. I mean, the thing that really does scare me are those out years on the contract. If he's gonna give up the player option, go to a lower number as the cap is theoretically rising, that does make me feel a little bit better. I don't mind the extra length on a deal like that just because of the shooting. I think he'll always be playable, especially if you're putting him on a team like the Knicks where he can play 4 or 5 depending on the matchup. So I don't think that's a crazy idea. I don't think the Knicks want to do that now. I think it's maybe something you revisit after the season.
yeah.
I think right now the Knicks are like, you can't do anything that alters the potential Giannis pursuit, but it's not a crazy idea. But did you
Yeah.
have any other nominees that you wanted to put forth in this category?
Just an honorable mention as I was looking through the trades. I feel like this was a trade that the Grizzlies got deeply criticized for when it happened, but the three-way trade, sending Marcus Smart to the Wizards, uh, because up through the trade deadline, Jaren Jackson was playing so well that it seemed like he was a lock to get All NBA. And if he did, he would have gotten the Supermax or some variation of it. Because the issue with Jaren, for those who forgot why he got a renegotiation extension this summer, his salary was too low for him to get a viable extension. So the Grizzlies, they gave up, pretty penny, a first round pick in this year's draft to get off Marcus Smart's contract. So the optics not good, giving up 2 firsts to get him, giving up a first to get off him. But that was a very wise hedge in case Jaren did not get All NBA, which he did not end up getting. Harden ended up getting that last spot. I don't agree with that, but he got it for third team. And that played a major role in the Grizzlies getting enough cap space to renegotiate Jaren's contract and extend him this summer. So that's it doesn't look great just considering the cost, but it was necessary. The Grizzlies needed to get off Marcus Smart when they did. For the Wizards, getting a first to take on Marcus Smart's great piece of business. The Kings, they gave up, I think, 1 second to get Jake LaRavia in the process. I feel like that was a pretty mutual beneficial trade. Kings didn't have like an advantage towards resigning LaRavia later because the Grizzlies declined his player team option, so they were limited in what they could resign him to. But the value was pretty good. They needed a player like him, so that's a little one I want to mention. I like that trade quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I wish for the Kings, if I was going to call this a benefit to them, they would have been able to keep Laravia. Obviously, they didn't. So, considering just how little they accomplished last year, it's hard to give them too much credit. As for Memphis, the trade was certainly beneficial in that they achieved their goal by doing it. The trade worked as they intended it to work. The question is, was the path that they took the optimal one? And I think since we both assume that Memphis is going to be in that play-in range this year, especially with all the injuries they have going into the season, they probably would have been better off, as Utah would have been with Lauri Markkanen, trading Jaren Jackson before they gave him the giant extension. They would have gotten great offers, presumably, at that low 20-ish million dollar cap hold. So if that's going to play out over the next few years, I think especially once they traded Desmond Bane and they really opened the door to a proper tank, having that option to trade Jaren at the lower figure and also having your first round pick in 25 would have been pretty useful. But that's not what they wanted to do. So I will say it is a mutually beneficial trade from the respect that all of the teams involved accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. So I think that's a reasonable honorable mention. We're going to move on to rumor of the year, that all 3 of my picks are kind of tied into the same storyline narrative, but that's just how it goes sometimes. Number 3, the Warriors will not trade Brandon Pajemski for Lauri Markkanen. I am not even criticizing them for that. I think the way things played out for them was much better than a market and trade would have. I just love any rumor. Like, we get one of these every year or two of a team basically saying, hey, this young guy who's like not become a full-time starter yet and wasn't a high draft pick and doesn't have the pedigree, we're not trading him for anything. The famous one was Roddy Beaubois in Dallas. Taylor Horton Tucker with the Lakers was a big one. It always tends to happen with big market teams because when they hit on a second round pick or a late first round pick or whatever, they have this sheen to them where they believe that because we're the Lakers, because we're the Warriors, we're infallible, we're so smart. This guy we took at the end of the first round, in the middle of the first round, or whatever, is going to become a star because we've seen these flashes. Sometimes it works out, more often it doesn't. I think, again, ultimately they were right not to make the Lowry marketing trade. I just think it was a funny news cycle, and we'll see if Brandon Podziemski ultimately proves that he deserved to be in that untouchable category.
There's also the original. The Cavs refused to trade J.J. Hickson for Amari Stoudemire.
Oh my God, I forgot about that one.
And I think we still have to take these with a grain of salt. A lot of these, like at least half of them cannot be true. Like, it's just so funny. Like, regardless of whether it's factual or not, the fact that these quotes are just catching on like they do, it's so funny. And it'd be funny if like rival executive teams just make up something like that just to try to make fun of some other team. No, it's great. And I saw some really funny, I remember I'd scroll on Twitter at some times and people would make just jokes about it. Oh, the Warriors, they could have had I don't know, Giannis, but people just making that up on Twitter, but they refused to give up Brandon Podziemski. It was still pretty funny to me. Yeah, I'll defer to you on these ones. I couldn't think too much on certain rumors. For me, I'll just say for me, I think the best rumor, just anything involving the Suns. And this kind of does align with your number one, which is Kevin Durant to the Warriors. 2. So, okay, so let's just go through yours, and then we'll get to why I think just anything Suns related for me was great.
Second place is all things Jimmy Butler to the Suns, and first place is Kevin Durant almost going back to the Warriors. Jimmy Butler to the Suns was so funny because they were like, I don't know what the records were, but they were either like a worse team than Miami was, or in that same kind of ballpark for most of the year. But Jimmy was behind the scenes apparently just saying, I only want Phoenix. I only want Phoenix. There was even that funny report where I think at one point he was like, I think Mark Spears came out with it and said he'll go anywhere but Memphis, which is just the funniest drive-by rumor I ever remember. Why he was so fixated on the Suns for a lot of this trade saga, I don't know. Because the Warriors did ultimately end up giving him the max extension. So if there was a point where he was maybe a little bit more reluctant to go to the Warriors, were the Warriors at one point less certain about giving the extension? I don't know. But Jimmy Butler, I think the Suns, the 2024-25 Suns, have to be the worst team that an all-star has ever tried to force his way to, right? Can you think of another worse team?
No. But also the Suns, it was just like the theory of them that they have these stars. If they just got the right fit, that it would work out. Like until we got closer to the trade deadline, I think there was still that optimism. Okay, maybe if they could turn Bradley Beal into Jimmy Butler, that the Suns might finally get to expectation. So I think so. So then I guess that segues to me the Bradley Beal of it all. That
the little side rumor within the entree rumor.
That's the thing. They're all in the end. The Suns are the common denominator in all this because you can't talk about the Jimmy Butler rumors without talking about. I guess they're not. Is it even fair to call them Bradley Beal rumors? Because there's no way any of these teams, the Heat or any third team with cap space or that might be willing to take him on. There's no way that he was actually like far along on talks to even be moved to make this happen for the Suns. He still had that 2 years, $112 million left on his contract, started coming off the bench for the Suns. It was pretty clear quickly that it didn't work the first season, was not going to work this next season. And the fact that for like a good throughout the Jimmy saga that there was like a cloud of belief that they might be able to turn Bradley Beal into Jimmy Butler somehow, especially after they did that Jazz trade, turning that one first to three, that maybe they would get it done. That was pretty fun. Just that Beal, the whole Beal element of it all. He was never going to get traded. You mentioned Jimmy Butler. Yeah, so why don't you touch on Kevin Durant, another Suns adjacent rumor?
Yeah, that felt like NBA fan fiction to me. Like, wait, Kevin Durant is going back to the Warriors? I feel like LeBron going back to the Cavs in 2014 opened up an entirely new genre of trade rumor because this didn't used to happen, right? A guy would leave a team on bad terms and they would just be like, they're dead to me. He's not going back there. That's insane. But LeBron going back to the Cavs kind of showed the rest of the league what like a heartwarming story it could be. So for a second there, like I think it was so the Luka trade happens on late Saturday night. Sunday, the Fox trade happens at night. And I remember throughout Monday kind of building up, and hearing behind the scenes like, oh, KD's like the Warriors are gonna get this done. And then finally he's the one who squashes it, which is the funniest part of all of this, by the way, because it's almost like the Suns and the Warriors are like, no, yeah, it'll be coming home. It'll be LeBron all over again. It'll be great. And KD's just like, actually, no, I don't want that, which is just the whole experience of it was so surreal and something that like doesn't really happen in other sports, right? Like there was never a moment where Tom Brady was playing on the Bucks and they were struggling. It's like maybe they'll trade him back to the Patriots. Like I just that it was just something that didn't used to happen, and now we actually do get every now and then where we hear about a guy potentially returning, but I think this was a new twist on it. I don't ever remember hearing that he might return story and then hearing actually he doesn't want to. Even Damian Lillard this offseason, like, oh, he leaves Portland for 2 years, he comes back, and everybody's super happy. Well, it turns out, no, KD was not happy with how he left Golden State, and he was not interested in going back.
For me, it was the possibility that Kevin Durant might actually have gotten traded at the trade deadline, because we're going for a whole month speculating if the Suns can get Jimmy Butler, if Jimmy Butler can pout his way to eventually forcing his way to the Suns. I think at some point some people thought that might be possible. And then plot twist, not only are they not getting Jimmy Butler, but they might have to trade Kevin Durant. Maybe they could get Jimmy Butler in the process. There was that ESPN report that they could have gotten Jimmy and Kuminga and Valanciunas and multiple firsts, would have been amazing. I don't know how. Looking back at it, I'm not sure if they were really going to get all that, seeing what they eventually got for KD. But if you've been paying attention to not just the Suns' struggles, but just how unsustainable it is to keep this roster together for anything less than making the Western Conference Finals, probably even just the finals, you wouldn't have been surprised that they eventually had to move off Kevin Durant. And then these rumors extended to some of the lesser players. Like, weren't there quotes about Yusuf Nurkic? Like, yeah, he's definitely gonna get traded. This is just not working. Like, he's for sure gonna get moved. What am I misremembering? There were definitely some Nurkic type rumors ahead of him getting traded.
There were rumors for every Phoenix player except for Devin Booker. And even now, like he signed that ridiculous extension. It's going to pay him like 70 million a year. I can't remember what the number is. Even now, like with Booker, there were people, including me and I think you, saying like, I'd probably trade him. I'd probably tear this thing down. So any Phoenix Suns player except for Devin Booker was involved in meaningful trade rumors last year. But it's kind of wild that all of these rumor of the year candidates tie back to like ultimately one transaction. It all circled around Jimmy in some fashion. We haven't mentioned the Shams report that basically said the Warriors have called every team in the NBA with a star and are trying to get him, right? Like they called LeBron, they tried to get Paul George in the offseason. There's a whole marketing saga. The Warriors' quest for a star was kind of what powered a lot of the rumor mill last year. But we're talking about trades that took place at the deadline, which is a nice segue to our next award, deadline trade of the year. We haven't touched on this trade yet. I think it became a lot more interesting after the fact, especially with the way this offseason went. Third place, De'Aaron Fox to the San Antonio Spurs. There are a lot of tendrils within this that we're going to touch on in other categories. And I think you want to touch on another trade made between these teams. But in itself, it was a pretty interesting dynamic where I think this was the first time in a trade request anybody had ever wanted to go to San Antonio specifically, because it's a small market team and they tend not to get guys like this, LaMarcus Aldridge notwithstanding. But because De'Aaron Fox forced his way to San Antonio specifically, the Spurs were able to get him at 80% of his fair trade value. It was like the trade itself was a pretty reasonable value for them, but they gave him the 4-year extension on top of that after getting Dylan Harper. And it's that weird trade where at the time we all assumed this was a big trade, a big win for the Spurs, and it still ultimately might be. I think the value they paid was entirely reasonable. But because they got Dylan Harper in the lottery, they kind of might prefer to have a mulligan if they could do it over again. And it's going to unlock all of these other narratives over the coming years. I think we both assume that between Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, and De'Aaron Fox, one of those guys is probably going to be gone within a year or two, right? Like when the Spurs hit whatever their final stage is, it's not going to be with all three of those guards. So it's a fascinating trade. Obviously, the Spurs didn't get to benefit from it in the short term last year because Victor Wembanyama had the blood clot, but it gives them a co-star for this season. If they're trying to be competitive this year, I think it's going to make them meaningfully better. It was an interesting trade. I think easy third place choice for me.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, I'm sure whoever's listening could figure out what the other two are. It's a pretty clear hierarchy of what are the top 3 deadline trades. Was clearly a very explosive one at the top. I like the Fox trade for the Spurs mainly because I don't think they really gave up anything of value. The only pick I think they gave up that's right now pretty valuable
One, yeah,
is that Wolves pick because there's so much time on it. So like this the Kings just completely I think it worked out really horribly for them. They didn't get anything great for them. They ended up taking on Zach LaVine, and I think that's a whole other issue that they're gonna have.
This trade pops up in a different category for that reason.
Yeah. So for the Spurs, I wasn't ahead of the trade. I wasn't for the Spurs trading for Fox at the trade deadline, mainly because I figured it's gonna require them trading some valuable players, like maybe Stephon Castle and maybe multiple valuable picks. But for them to get everything for them to get him for what little they gave up, I think made a lot more sense for them to just do it at the time they did it. And part of the equation was that, well, if you're trading for Fox, you're probably pushing for the playoffs. You're already kind of in the lottery. Don't you want to bottom out a little? And it worked out perfectly where the lottery gods gave them the second pick. So they got their cake ate it too. And so, yeah, that worked out perfectly for the Spurs. What is number 2, Sam?
I have one more note that I want to add to the Fox trade. I think the funniest thing about this trade is that in July of 24, they made the DeMar DeRozan trade, the same 3 teams, the Bulls, the Spurs, and the Kings. And in that trade, the Spurs get an unprotected 2031 first-round swap from the Kings, only to take on a contract in Harrison Barnes. That was not even a bad contract, by the way, just money that had to be moved. Fast forward 8 months, and they're negotiating a trade for a superstar. Maybe the best player the Kings have had in 20 years, certainly in the top 3. And the Kings, I have to imagine, at some point in those negotiations said, we would love to get the swap rights back on our 2031 first round pick. And the Spurs presumably said no. So what that's implying is that the Kings gave up more to get off of Harrison Barnes than they got back for De'Aaron Fox, which is just kind of a hilarious little note on this trade. Great negotiating work by the Spurs to somehow emerge from both of these trades still having that swap.
Yeah.
Number 2,
that trade will come up in a future category.
Yes. Number 2, Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, Stephen Curry gets hurt in the second round. We don't know what the Warriors would have been last year, but they add Al Horford. They add a couple other minimum guys this year. We think they're going to be pretty good this year, assuming the older guys don't meaningfully decline. That took a 500-ish Warriors team. They go 23-8 down the stretch. They win in the first round against Houston, and they look like a fringe contender at least. I think they would have beaten Minnesota, and I don't think they would have beaten Oklahoma City, but they would have given them a reasonably competitive series. It breathed new life into the Stephen Curry, Draymond Green era in Golden State. So it didn't work out, obviously, in the playoffs because of injuries, but a no-brainer trade for the Warriors where they give up only one first-round pick, and it's a first-round pick in the immediate year, so they're not having to worry about some pick in the out years when Steph is older, when Draymond's older, when Jimmy's older, maybe some of them retired or left. No, you get that pick obligation out of the way quickly. You give up Andrew Wiggins, who's just a worse version of Jimmy. Easy home run trade for the Warriors, especially when you compare it to what they were willing to give up for Lauri Markkanen or some of these younger stars. Just good cheap price, good addition, made them a lot better. No brainer for the Warriors. Easy number 2.
Yeah, I think I kind of go back and forth between that one and the Fox trade, mainly because the Fox one for the long term and the value the Spurs gave up, but immediate results wise, that Jimmy Butler trade immediately paid dividends for the Warriors. And I would say I I think if fully healthy, they should be above a play-in team this year. But if you are in that range, then you have a chance to get out of the West. It's still requires some luck, probably some injuries to the Thunder, and they already do have some injuries, mostly on the minor side. Their most significant injured player right now is Jalen Williams. Still hasn't fully recovered from that wrist injury. So if the Warriors get enough luck, why not? You can't rule it out. The Heat.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, there's one other Warriors component I think we need to touch on, which is they gave up so little that they can now make another big trade on top of this. They have the big Kuminga contract as well. If they had traded for Markkanen or Durant or somebody like that, and you're talking about giving up 3 or 4 first round picks, now you're kind of locked into your team. But there is now a world in which the Warriors have Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, and another big name that they get at this year's deadline. We assume they're going to trade Jonathan Kuminga. We'll see how that pans out. But I think it obviously made them better last year. It also just kept the powder dry enough for them to do whatever else they're going to want to do.
Yeah, I wrote about this last week. I talked about Jonathan Kuminga as a trade candidate and how the Warriors could make a trade involving him. But as an example, Jake Fisher reported that the Warriors are interested in Trey Murphy. If you now with the way Kuminga's salary is, you attach him with like D'Anthony Melton. That's enough to match for Trey Murphy. They have all their picks going forward. They could trade up to 4. That just said like the high end example of what they could do. If you can get a guy like a Trey Murphy or even just like another really good shooter in the making mid $20 million range, that's probably the high end scenario of what you can pull off this trade deadline. Yeah, so that's a great point to mention. I still think the Heat came out reasonably well, just given how much Jimmy went out of his way to tank his value and just do everything he did, getting one first. We'll see how Wiggins pans out. You never know what you're going to get from him. Who else did they get? Like, did they get any? They got Davion Mitchell. Was that like directly from that trade?
Another category.
Okay.
It was like because he was on Toronto, and Toronto obviously was not involved in the trade until I think at the end when they needed to make the salaries work. The Pistons got in there at the end. That's how they got Dennis Schroeder. I think it was a whole big complicated thing. I'm going to mention Davion Mitchell in another category. Yeah. I think given the circumstances, the Heat did about as well as you could hope for. The issue here was that they waited as long as they did. If they knew they weren't going to extend Jimmy in the offseason, which it certainly seems like they did, based on Pat Riley's quotes at his end-of-season press conference, you got to trade him right away. You have to know, having had him in the building for several years, he is going to be disruptive. He's going to make this hard on us. His value is only going to go down. If they had traded him in the summer of 24, they could have gotten more, at least I assume. So, like, maybe then you could have made something work with Phoenix, or maybe something like, I don't know what the trade would have been. I just think you would have been able to get a better deal if you'd acted faster. But under the circumstances, Yeah, I think the Heat did about as well as you could have hoped.
Yeah, I think they came out all right in it. And then the number one,
Yeah, we're
which
not going to talk about this one in as much depth right now because it comes up a lot later in multiple other categories. The trade deadline trade of the year, you'll be stunned to hear, is Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 unprotected first round pick from the Lakers. Again, that trade's going to come up later. We're going to save the big discussion on it, but we're going to segue into our next category, which is cap dump of the year. Why are we doing this one right after that one? Well, here's my third place for cap dump of the year. And you're going to have much more granular and specific cap dumps than me. I'm going to be very interested to hear your nominees as well. My third place is the Lakers moving Anthony Davis before they have to extend him next summer, because I think that extension, which Dallas basically has to give him because of what they traded to get him, is going to be a potential disaster given his age, given how frequently he gets hurt, given the fact that the three-pointer has just never developed consistently. I would not be that interested in being in the Anthony Davis business when you're talking about the end of the 2020s and into the 2030s. Aside from getting Luka, which is, I mean, a godsend for the Lakers on so many levels, getting out of keeping Anthony Davis long term, I think was a big win for the Lakers. That's my third place. Am I crazy? Am I reasonable for putting that there?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's crazy. They had he just extended 2 years ago, so he's going to be extension eligible again next year. I'm really curious how much, if at all, Dallas put his next extension into the equation. How much they want to offer him.
Well,
Uh,
remember, he waived the trade bonus. So,
yeah,
again, he knows Nico very well from the Nike days. I'm not saying that anything's been agreed to. I'm just saying this came together very quickly and with very little dissent. It's rare that guys want to get traded from the Lakers. So, I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if there was some understanding there.
yeah. I think Zach Lowe kind of touched on it where AD's probably going to just auto demand the max. What does Dallas do there? Do you try to negotiate a little bit less than that? Like, you can perceive that a little bit less than the max is a win, but like, what I don't even know like what percentage he should be getting a year from now. Let's see how he looks this year. All right, let's do your next two, and then I'll go mine because mine are quite different.
Second place, I have ripped Nico Harrison in well, I guess we're going to rip him more when we talk about the Luka trade later. I'm going to give him credit for one. The Mavericks needed to dump Tim Hardaway Jr. to get Klay Thompson. So not only do they get off of Tim Hardaway, they get Quentin Grimes back, who was better last year and is obviously significantly younger. Now we're going to talk about Quentin Grimes in another category as well, but it's very rare that you successfully execute a cap dump where you get the better, cheaper, and younger player, which the Mavericks did. In a vacuum, I think that's a great cap dump.
Yeah, the thing is, if you guys look at my videos from last year when I did fake trades and moves for each team ahead of the 2024 offseason, I actually proposed Tim Hardaway for Quentin Grimes, but it would involve the Mavs trading their 2025 first round pick because coming off the 2024, first of all, like coming off the 2024 finals, you'd probably think that pick's not going to be that amazing. But also, I felt like Quentin Grimes is good enough that if you're gonna, say help the Mavs save over $10 million or whatever it is, and give them Quentin Grimes, who may not have been that valuable to the Pistons, but I think is still pretty damn valuable based on how he played for the Knicks in his first 3 years. I felt like a first round pick felt appropriate. So for the Mavs to get Quentin Grimes in the process for the price of 3 seconds, yeah, that's a heist. It just the part two of the Quentin Grimes story in Dallas is what just hurts me the most. We'll get into that a little later. What's your number one?
Zach LaVine to the Kings. I was critical of the Bulls at the time for what they got back in this deal, which was control of their own first round pick from San Antonio, which was top 8 protected. I still really dislike the process on that because you could have just kept that pick by tanking, but the Bulls refused to do that. So they effectively had to trade somebody who at the time we perceived as having like a first round pick's worth of value to get control of a pick that they theoretically already should have controlled. That being said, you look at this now and to say, just given the contract size, given the reality of the aprons and all of the injury risk that comes applied to Zach LaVine, how miserable things look in Sacramento, being able to get positive value to get off of a max contract like LaVine, I think that's a pretty big win for Chicago. It's rare that I praise their front office, but with hindsight, good work. Great cap dump in that deal. I can't believe the Kings did it, but from the Bulls side, like, great work.
Yeah, I think people were pretty surprised that Zach LaVine played well enough that the reward for the Bulls is that they can just get off him instead of maybe getting a little bit of positive value, whether it's like a crappy first. Well, they did get a crappy first, their own pick back that was never going to convey.
Well, it wasn't a crappy. It was like number 12. That's like a good pick.
But I think it ended up.
They should have tanked for it.
Yeah, so just something, I guess. For all we know, maybe just fulfilled a touch requirement. Like, so that worked out great for the Bulls. That they knew they didn't get too carried away by how Zach LaVine was playing last year. They took the first opportunity they can to get off him, and that's one of their best decisions in the past few years.
So you have some other good nominees here, right?
Yeah. So my number 3 is completely different. My number 3, it's a very simple one. The Hornets taking on Reggie Jackson from the Denver Nuggets for 3 second-round picks. And that's really great piece of business for the Hornets because that's the only salary dump of the last year that had a team taken on getting 3 seconds for a guy making just a little bit above the minimum. If you look at all the other salary dumps involving guys making the minimum or slightly above, it's 1 second-round pick. So like a very overlooked heist by the Hornets, in my opinion. No one else got anything close for a salary dump of a guy with 1 year left on his contract. Thoughts on that one?
I mean, I think it's just a good workman-like cap dump. Great value, like no notes. Charlotte, good job. I just think it's lower stakes than the other ones.
Still, very big marginal win for me. I like that. My number 2, now this, we hinted about this when we were talking about the De'Aaron Fox trade, but the first Spurs Kings Bulls trade, the one that sent DeMar DeRozan to the Kings, but so that's what you'll remember the trade by. But the big winners of that one were the Spurs, who got Harrison Barnes, who's still very productive, provides a need on the Spurs team, both last year and this year. But they also got a Kings is it an unprotected first round pick swap?
Unprotected swap in 31.
Yeah, in 2031, which they still have while getting De'Aaron Fox later. Just getting no better use of their cap space. Like they couldn't have gotten a better player available, and they got arguably the best pick swap traded in the past year. Like with the Kings, chances are that might hit, that might convey. Spurs should be really good in 2030, and the Kings, who knows? Chances are the Spurs will at least be slightly better than the Kings. So yeah,
this is an interesting one because I had framed it as cap dumps for the dumping team, the team that's but no, I think this is reasonable. Like when I did this with Colin Ward-Henninger on the old podcast in 2019 or 2020, whatever it was, we had separate categories for this type of dump where the team accepting the dump is its own category. In that perspective, this is an incredible trade for San Antonio. This was the best any team did, absorbing somebody else's cap dump. In 2031, that's when Victor Wembanyama is going to be going into his 9th season. So assuming he stays healthy, we're talking about peak of his powers, Wemby. That pick is going to be like 28, 29, or 30. Even if the Kings are decent, which I suspect they won't be because they rarely are, that's going to be like a 10, 15 pick jump. And because they're the Kings, because they're always in the lottery, it might be substantially better.
You basically did cap dumps for the team trading the salary. I'm doing the reverse of that, which is
Yeah.
the best ones where the team is receiving the salary. And my
Next
number
year we'll do
one,
separate categories because you're right. It's
yeah,
totally valid.
I mean, it all worked out that way. A little more variation. My number one is I believe this was like right after the draft. The Sacramento Kings traded Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov to the Raptors for Jalen McDaniels, and they included like a second round pick, they included one second
Yeah.
round pick for the Raptors to take on that extra money. The Kings needed to save money, and this is number one because the Raptors ended up being the one who saved more money. They acquired Vazenkov, who is making like $6 million, and he agrees to a buyout after getting traded there, where he gives up all the money. So the Raptors end up being in a great position. That saves them a lot of flexibility into the season, where they picked up Bruce Brown's team option, so they were like kind of close to the tax, but now they're like now by was Vazenkov giving up all his money, that gave him a lot of flexibility, which ended up putting them in a much better position to pull off that Brandon Ingram trade. But yeah, so far the Kings have been the butt of our awards, where they basically wasted a second to save money when maybe there was another. I don't know if they would have saved all that money with Vazenkov, but uh, they trade a second to get off Davion Mitchell essentially, and then they have to give up another second to get off Jalen McDaniels later. So just great move by the Raptors to take on salary, but then save money simultaneously.
I have a couple of notes on this one. First of all, the second round pick the Raptors got was Jamal Shed, who I think is like a very good second round pick. He is a delight to watch defensively. He's obviously very small, but he's just ferocious. The Kings could really use a defender like that in their backcourt. They have Keon Ellis, but we talked about the Keon Ellis saga as it was happening. They really botched his contract situation, and now he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next offseason unless they can extend him, which I presume they would have to do at an inflated figure, frankly. So if I were them, I'd be pretty annoyed that I don't have Jamal Shed right now. The
And
other thing that's worth pointing
quick
out
interruption about Keon Ellis. You mentioned we got some breaking news that Keegan Murray is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. I already am and have been thinking that Keon Ellis could be starting. Maybe they start him over DeRozan or something. But I would have to imagine that this injury, I think you got to start Keon Ellis at this point. Who's stopping anybody on that
he's
starting
the
lineup
only
otherwise?
defender left on the team.
Yeah, so that just another thing that might go into another thing that might help Keon Ellis's case towards getting a big extension at some point this summer. Yeah, he's got a great opportunity ahead of him now.
And then there's the other part of this is we're going to be having the same conversation next offseason we do these awards, because for the second straight offseason, the Kings trade a guy who wants to go back to Europe and don't get the savings because Jonas Valanciunas, they trade to the Nuggets for Dario Saric, but then Jonas wants to go back to Europe and they could have gotten off of that entire contract, presumably, or at least most of it. I don't know what the exact negotiations would have been. So, yeah, this keeps happening to the Kings where they make unnecessary cap dumps with guys who want to leave the NBA anyway. Also, can we just maybe wonder, do the Kings have a bit of a problem where guys come to Sacramento and then immediately realize they don't want to play in the NBA anymore? Because that happened with Zenkov, it happened with Jonas. I forget, did that happen with, was it Nemanja Bjelica? There was somebody else the Kings had who I think agreed to a contract with somebody, and then like I can't remember what the specifics were, but this has come up for the Kings in the past where a lot of guys stop off in Sacramento and then decide, I think I'm done with the NBA.
Yeah, it might happen with Sarge this year, but it might not be necessarily because of his choice. If he's not gonna, if he's more or less the same guy he was last year, then it might not be up to him if he's in the NBA next year.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm pretty confident that Dario Saric will not be an NBA caliber player last year because he wasn't last year. He's getting older. The skill set doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
I was trying to look up the Nemanja Bjelica situation, but he did play for a couple more teams, so that wasn't
Yeah,
worth
he
thinking
won
about.
the championship with the Warriors, and I think immediately went to Turkey or something.
Yes. Anyway, draft day trade of the year. We had a lot of different ones. There were not many very interesting trades on draft day. Third place, we don't really have to talk about this one, but just good piece of work for the Warriors. Lindy Waters for Quentin Post. Quentin Post turned into the Warriors need a very specific sort of player, and Quentin Post obviously checks that box very easily. So just good work by Golden State there. We don't really have to talk about that one. The next two are the more important
Wait,
ones.
no, hold on. I think you got the trade mixed up. I think it was Quinton Post for Lindy Waters and then Quinton Post again. They like traded the Quinton Post pick to the Thunder for Lindy Waters, and then through another trade got that pick back.
Wait, I'm so confused right now, but the Warriors ending up with Quentin Post, however they did, was my third place just because congratulations to them. I'm not going to bother looking up the specific mechanics of how that happened, but I just looked at the transaction report over the last year. You can do that on basketball reference, NBA.com, and I just saw the trade that was Lindy Waters for
Yeah.
Quentin Post. So, like, maybe I got that backwards.
He was
Um,
traded. I got it. He got traded for Lindy Waters. So then the Thunder have the Quinton Post pick. They trade that pick to the Blazers for the Oso Ighodaro pick, which I guess the Thunder trade to the Suns later. And then the Blazers traded the Quinton Post pick again back to the Warriors straight for cash.
Oh, so yeah, I'd totally forgotten that Lindy Waters played for the Warriors.
Yeah.
Wow, but yeah, good work by the Warriors ultimately getting Quentin Post back. You have different draft day trades, so we can have a proper third place winner. Second place, we've mentioned this trade before, Denny Avdia to the Portland Trailblazers. We talked about it a fair bit up top. It was just a nice, good piece of business for both sides. Both teams happy with where it ended up. First place, this is just one of the more interesting trades that I remember in recent years. Minnesota, who had obviously traded most of their future draft capital to Utah for Rudy Gobert, has a bit of a problem where they know they're going to need to find a long-term point guard to replace Mike Conley. But because of the aprons, because of all the picks they were out, they just didn't have much to work with. They couldn't bring in an established veteran guy. So they figure we have to get somebody cheaper. We have to get somebody on a rookie scale deal. So they make this very creative trade with San Antonio where they give up a top one protected swap in 2030 and their unprotected pick in 2031 for the number 8 pick, which turned out to be Rob Dillingham. The jury is still out on who Rob Dillingham's going to be. He showed like small flashes in his rookie year for Minnesota. Terrence Shannon was the more impressive rookie for the Timberwolves last season. We'll probably see both of them play a meaningful amount this year. But I don't ever remember seeing a team come up with such a creative solution to we need to bring in a new long-term guard, a new long-term anything. We don't have the money to do it and we don't have the picks to do it. So we're going to have to go deep into our out years to get a rookie to do it eventually. They did it before Mike Conley really drastically tailed off. They obviously got to sneak Dillingham in, gave him a developmental year last year. It was a very interesting trade. I think San Antonio probably got more value. They ultimately traded that one pick for Minnesota in 31 in the De'Aaron Fox deal. I think that's a pretty valuable pick, just considering if Minnesota has not won a title by 2030 or made the finals or like made it look like they're really on track to consistently compete for titles at that point, you have to imagine Anthony Edwards is gone. And if Anthony Edwards is gone when they don't have their picks, suddenly their out picks become very, very valuable. So I think San Antonio got more value, but we'll see what Rob Dillingham turns out to be. And it was just a very creative trade by Minnesota. Tim Conley has come up with a couple of interesting deals like that in the past. I don't know who won it, but it was the most interesting trade to me.
Yeah, the only thing I have to point out is exactly what you just mentioned about the Wolves options, where last summer was the year where all the new second apron rules really kicked in, and the Wolves, they were all way above the second apron. They couldn't aggregate, they couldn't increase their salary for taking on a player under contract. But the only ways that second apron teams can increase their payroll is by re-signing, extending their own players, signing minimum players, or trading for drafted player rights. So Rob Dillingham, what was he, 6th or 8th overall pick? That's
Eighth pick.
an 8th overall pick makes a pretty good amount of money. So they were able to just simply absorb that. So maybe if they weren't above the second apron, they would have tried to pursue a veteran option. But this was as this was really most likely the best they can get, and they traded what little that they had to offer, just that one available first round pick that they had. So time will tell to see if Rob Dillingham can be that guy that they're hoping for. But as far as the actual creativity, I'm with you there. I thought it was pretty cool. I just have a couple I want to list. I'm not like I don't feel so strongly about these, but I don't think last year the 24 draft had like too many notable draft day trades. But an interesting one, the Hawks trading AJ Griffin to the Rockets for a second round pick. That second round pick became Nikola Jurisic, who's going to be a rookie this year. But it's not so much about getting him, but more so that AJ Griffin retired a couple of months right before the season started. So you got to wonder if the Hawks maybe had a feeling that something like this would happen. Either way, for them to get off him, create some flexibility now, which was in hindsight, when you see how close they were to narrowly avoiding the luxury tax last year after all the trades they did, getting off AJ Griffin made a lot of sense. But to get some value for a player who was going to retire, pretty good piece of business for them.
Yeah, I think that was I mean, it's just one of those, like, it's unfortunate for Houston, but I think Houston's doing okay.
Yeah, he
yeah,
gave up all but like 250K in the buyout, so Houston just
yeah,
lost the second round pick, really.
right.
Second place, that Denny Avdia to the Blazers. That might be number one that really might be number one, but that was a very notable draft day trade. We've talked about that. Just another trade I found very interesting. The Suns trading the number 22 pick, which became Rashawn Holmes, to the Nuggets for the 28th pick, which became Ryan Dunn, and 3 second round picks. And I want to again bring up the Reggie Jackson dump that earlier. I don't know if that came before or right after. That cost the Nuggets 3 second round picks. Here they trade another 3 second round picks. The Nuggets had 0 picks to trade all of last season. Not a first round pick, not a second round pick. They just burned through them all for in these trades. I think the Suns I think they got the best out of this deal and obviously we'll see how Day'Ron Holmes pans out. But I'm not even evaluating this based on how good I think those Ryan Dunn or Day'Ron Holmes going to be. Just the fact that they got 3 second round picks to move down 6 spots for the guy that they clearly wanted. And there's video proof of them negotiating with the Nuggets, or they keep getting another second round pick added. I just got a kick out of that one. So that was a very fun draft day trade to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me kind of wondering if that deal had fallen through and the Nuggets had just had Ryan Dunn. Would he have been enough to get them past Oklahoma City last year? Because they were one player
Mm.
short. Now, obviously, Ryan Dunn is kind of a liability on offense, but he's a very, very good defender. I mean, we'll see what Duron Holmes does for them. I think he would have been very, very helpful for Denver if he hadn't gotten hurt last year. I'm generally pretty high on him as a prospect. So, yeah, it's a very interesting trade. It's just unfortunate we didn't get to see one of the players involved actually play. We're going to move into another category here where we've touched on some of the trades to some extent, but I think we've only touched on the third place trade actually. So, stealth trade of the year. These are trades that like turned out to be much more significant than either we thought at the time or we haven't really seen the full effects yet, but we think these trades are going to be important in the long run. Third place, the Heat sneaking in and taking Davion Mitchell as a piece in the Jimmy Butler trade. They obviously, Golden State didn't have Davion Mitchell, but looping the Raptors in and getting them Davion Mitchell, he is a quintessential Heat player with how intense he is. Obviously, the defense. He shot really well from 3 in Miami last year. And that was always the question with him. If he could start making his threes with the way that he defends, he becomes a very valuable role player. And they ultimately got him back on a reasonable contract this year. So nice role player for them to have in the building. Just good work. None of us thought Davion Mitchell was ever going to put it together on offense. He did for the Heat. Nice work.
Yeah, I I think he should probably start for the Heat this year, and that's without really considering what he did in the play-in tournament offensively. I don't expect him to keep that up, but for him to have finally found a place where he could thrive with the Heat under Spoelstra, if he can just be like passable offensively, I'm really excited for what he could do for the Heat, but I think he needs to start. I think that's a very interesting question of what the Heat end up doing with their starting lineup. And as long Hero's not going to start the year, but once he does, I feel like you got to start Davion Mitchell, uh, get Norman Powell to help juice the offense off the bench. Um, I'll just go with my third place one. And this is a kind of similar type trade, a similar type player. The Clippers trading Russell Westbrook, who had just opted in to his $4 million player option and a second round pick swap to the Jazz for Chris Dunn, who they gave a 3-year deal, making like $5-6 million a year. The last year's not even fully guaranteed. And Chris Dunn, arguably at least a second team all defender, arguably he's best point of attack defender on the Clippers. I get the feeling, kind of like with the Heat, their conundrum between Powell, Mitchell, and how much they play those guys. It's pretty obvious that they're going to start Bradley Beal in the Clippers to start the year. But I could see after maybe 10 games, they just decide, okay, we got to start Chris Dunn. Like we need that was working for us last year. So very sneaky, stealthy move for the Clippers to get Chris Dunn for free, basically.
That's one of the best value contracts in the NBA right now. He has, I think, 2 more years at it's like $6 million a year, something like that. It's like some pitifully low number. It's like biannual exception money, basically, for
Yeah.
somebody who, like, obviously in the playoffs, his shooting became problematic enough that, okay, maybe he's not a starting caliber playoff player. He's a very, very valuable regular season guy, and you can at least use him off the bench in the playoffs for that money. It's an incredible deal. I have no objections there. That was a great piece of work by the Clippers. Second place, the Washington Wizards at the trade deadline trade Kyle Kuzma to the Milwaukee Bucks. They get back Chris Middleton, okay, decent vet to have in the building, shorter contract than Kuzma, which is nice. He obviously makes more per year, but shorter. They get off of that money earlier, fine. AJ Johnson, who I think is a pretty promising rookie from last year. I think at the very least, you'd be more excited to have AJ Johnson today than the version of Kyle Kuzma we saw in Milwaukee. But the real potential crown jewel here, the Wizards also got a secondary first round swap from the Bucks in 2028. What does a secondary swap mean? It means that Portland has the right of first refusal on a swap with the Bucks because they got it in the Damian Lillard trade. But, and this is a big but, the Portland Trailblazers also currently owe the Chicago Bulls a first round pick that is top 14 protected. If that pick conveys in 2028, then the Wizards would have unprotected swap rights with the Bucks in 2028 because the Blazers wouldn't have a pick to swap with. So what are the conditions necessary for that? It's a top 14 protection from now through 2028. Therefore, if the Blazers miss the playoffs in 26 and 27 and then make it in 28, which is not likely, but I think it's an entirely plausible sequence of events for a young team in the Western Conference, then all of a sudden, the Wizards could have unprotected swap rights with the post-Giannis Bucks, all for the price of giving up Kyle Kuzma, who turned out to be a bad player for the Bucks anyway, at least last year. We have not talked enough about what a great deal this was for the Wizards, but my God, what a steal for the Wizards.
Yeah, I'm actively reading the conditions of this, and right now it's just kind of gibberish to me. But I do recall that at the time the trade happened, I was a little confused about whether that swap's going to amount to much. But I also did remember after doing much research that that the Wizards will probably benefit from this. So good for them. I think the biggest thing we could count on, we don't know. We don't know enough about. I don't know enough about what kind of player AJ Johnson is going to be. I think the biggest thing you could count on is that they got off the additional year of Kuzma's contract, but that swap it should be it should probably hit based on what you're saying.
It's like a 20% chance that the Wizards get one of the most valuable swaps in the NBA, right? Like I rank the picks every year of the most valuable out picks from trades. 2028 Milwaukee is very high on that list because of everything that's going on with Giannis. And the Wizards have a chance. It's a low percentage chance. It's well below 50% that they are going to be the team that controls that pick because of this trade. So if you really look at the trade, they accomplish cap savings by getting off of the last Kuzma year. They get a good young prospect in AJ Johnson, and then they get a potentially very valuable draft swap, all for Kyle Kuzma. Why does Kyle Kuzma warrant all of this?
Got the Bucks under the second apron. Honestly, I think it was more financially motivated, if anything.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that was
yeah.
that's my big stealth trade of the year that nobody talked about. The
Yeah.
winner is a trade that we have talked about a fair bit, but I still don't think we've really appreciated the gravity of what the Phoenix Suns did here. The Phoenix Suns trade their unprotected 2031 first round pick. Mind you, this is a team that does not control any of its own first round picks from now until 2031 to the Utah Jazz for 3 bad first round picks that were, I believe, all of them were either the least favorable or the second least favorable between several picks belonging to good teams. One of those picks gets used to dump Yusuf Nurkic. 2 more get used to trade for Mark Williams. So, in effect, the Phoenix Suns traded their unprotected first round pick in 2031 to turn Yusuf Nurkic into Mark Williams, basically.
Yeah.
That 2031 Suns pick is a top 5 most valuable outgoing pick right now, top 10, something like that. Justin Zanuck, the GM of the Jazz, gave an interview after the trade where he called that the most valuable asset on the market.
So I'm going to be constantly reminding my listeners from time to time why this should be such a valuable pick, which is that the Suns, not only do they not have picks in the odd numbered years going forward, but with the picks that they do have left, which I believe is 28, 20, 30, maybe 27. Yeah, something like that. That there are swaps on swaps on swaps outgoing on those picks, largely due to the Bradley Beal trade and several other trades they did, like all these minor like salary dumps where they got extra second round picks, but they traded more derivative of swaps. So they're already low on picks, and then the picks they do have are probably going to be in the end of the first round. So there's no upside heading to the Suns. Out of if they do blow it up, which means they're trading Devin Booker, I feel like with that contract, you're kind of looking at a kind of like what at best what the Wolves got for Karl Anthony Towns with that contract. I think that's easily the most negative value contract in the league, the Devin Booker one now with that extension. Just a deadly recipe that if you're a Jazz fan, you're probably getting you're probably feeling good in your stomach right now hearing all this. Yeah, that should be a very valuable pick. And even if in the end it's not like a top 4 pick, it's going to hold enough value over the next 6 years that the Jazz could have a really strong opportunity to trade it for maybe there's a trade, maybe the young core finally becomes good enough, they're ready to take the next step, and they could convert that pick into someone who complements them, an all-star maybe. So yeah, and I believe that pick is number 1 in your traded outgoing picks
It is
rankings.
number 4.
Oh,
I
it's
just
number 4.
looked it up. It's number 4. I think there are other Suns picks ahead of it, so that should tell you everything we need to know about the Suns. This is something that we talk about a fair bit when it comes to future draft picks. The value in the trade is not just the potential that you could use that pick. You have however many years until that pick conveys to trade that pick. And where trades are concerned, perception is reality. The perception of the Phoenix Suns around the NBA right now is that they are a tire fire. They are one of the worst run organizations in the NBA. Therefore, if the Jazz want to go shopping with that pick, they basically have from now until the Suns look competent again. And considering the people running that team, I'm not confident that that's going to happen very soon. So even if the Suns are half decent by 31, do you think they're going to be on that track in 27 or 28? You have time to trade this pick. The worst case scenario, I think, for the Jazz, ironically, is if Phoenix gets so bad so quickly that they could trade Devin Booker and totally rebuild in time for 2031, right? Like, say this year is a disaster and they trade Devin Booker in the summer of 26 for a bunch of young guys and a bunch of picks and cap relief and blah, blah, blah. That would give the Suns 5 years to rebuild without their picks. And in 5 years, like, okay, maybe then you could get kind of decent doing that. That's like the worst case scenario for the Jazz. In the likelier world in which the Suns are like, really stubborn about this and they keep Devin Booker for the next several years, they get to 28, 29 and they still have him and they're going nowhere. That's when you look at this pick and you say, oh, yeah, that pick is going to be in like the top 5, top 6, top 7, something like that. It is an exceedingly valuable draft pick. And it's still not clear why the Suns did it because it looked for a minute like for whatever reason that was going to be the key to trading Bradley Beal for Jimmy Butler. Now, the logic we were looking at the time was that the Suns only had this one very valuable first round pick, and you can't trade the same first round pick multiple times unless you're talking about protections and all that, blah, blah, blah. So they needed a first round pick to get off of Bradley Beal, and they needed a separate first round pick to trade for Jimmy Butler. So the logic was seemingly we are going to trade this one very valuable pick for 3 picks that are in theory worth a third as much. So we can therefore pay multiple teams to help us. The downside there is those picks were not worth 1/3 of that 2031 Suns pick. They were worth like 3% of those 2031 Suns picks. So it was a terrible trade for the Suns that unless Mark Williams, and I am a big fan of Mark Williams, as I say on this show and in writing repeatedly, unless he stays healthy, that trade is going to be an utter disaster for the Suns. And even if he does stay healthy, I'm so unconfident in their organization as a whole that I think that's just quietly one of the worst trades of the last year.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
we're down to our last 2 categories.
Well, hold on. I got to bring up a couple others. And the reason you're saying you're saying it's stealthily one of the worst trades in the past few years, which from the Suns' perspective,
yeah.
I don't think it was that stealthy at all. For me, it was glaringly obvious that as soon as the Suns did that trade, that they're just further mortgaging their future. Like I had a feeling that from the moment they did the Kevin Durant trade that they were going to be in this really dreadful position where we're really speculating how bad things are going to be 5-6 years from now. So for them to do this trade, it was just kind of part of the course for me.
It wasn't the reason I called it a stealth trade. I didn't have another place to put this trade. There wasn't a category for it. So I invented this category to talk about it. And B, I think it's stealthy to like the average NBA fan, right? Like we are so in the know and so nerdy about this. And the listeners of this show are presumably as well. But like the average NBA fan is not looking at this time bomb that the Jazz traded to the Suns, essentially.
Yeah.
So like I think in like 3 or 4 years, maybe like the wider NBA viewing public is going to look at this and go like, wait, what? How did the Jazz get this? So that's why I called it a stealth trade. But it is reasonable to our kind of NBA fan and the people who are consuming this show. It's not a stealthy trade. It's just a great trade.
I would consider that, again, the Spurs getting Barnes with that King swap, super stealthy trade. And this one I'm considering very stealthy, which people might disagree with. But Quinn Grimes to the Sixers for Caleb Martin. And also they were supposed to get a second round pick. And they ended up like swapping second round picks. People were still so in shock and disbelief about the Luka Doncic trade that I think it took Quinn Grimes a month playing out of his mind for people to realize, holy shit, this trade is also so bad. And like one of like, maybe like not quite as bad as the Luka trade, but like by itself, like still a seriously horrible misstep by the Mavs. I wrote a whole article about it. Like I immediately when the trade at first happened, I think I was the only person to immediately be like, wait, hold on. The Mavs are trading a younger player, a cheaper one. This puts them back in the tax after they got out of it with the Luka trade. Grimes is better. Martin's injury prone. He hasn't even been playing for a month. They're trading a second with Quinn Grimes. You could probably get Quinn Grimes back at around the same money as Caleb Martin, which based on the way Grimes restricted free agency played out, that might still be in play. Uh, it's stealthy in the way that just people completely did not pay attention to it at the time because of the cloud of the Luka trade. So that one just deserves a mention.
I'm glad you brought that up. I have some things to say about that trade. First of all, you know who the Dallas Mavericks could really use with Kyrie Irving out is the version of Quentin Grimes that we saw in Philadelphia last year that was much more of an on-ball player. Now, you did bring up the restricted free agency, and I think that's important. I wonder how much that factored into this for Dallas because they had so many second apron issues. They're now hard capped, and they're now like so close to the second apron hard cap that they had to waive and stretch Olivier Maxence Prosper just to fit in Dante Exum. Now, you could say, oh, if they could have gotten Quentin Grimes back at the qualifying offer compared to what Caleb Martin's making, that's actually saving the money. But it's not quite that simple because if the Mavericks had been operating with a hard cap, then some team like the Nets or the Jazz with cap space or with actual cap space could have just swooped in and offered Quentin Grimes more than their hard cap room to come sign with them. Now, and then the other part of this is too, the number would have maybe been low enough that some team with the non-tax mid-level could have chased Quentin Grimes that way because the qualifying offer is only like 8 million, give or take. And I don't know how much Caleb Martin's making, but it's less than the full mid-level, I believe.
Martin makes more. He has like makes a million more, but then he's also got like those incentives that affect the apron. So they would have saved.
When you factor in like how tight they are under the apron, I suspect the Nets or the Jazz or some mid-level team would have come in and made an offer sheet for Quentin Grimes that the Mavericks legally couldn't match. So I do think they would have probably lost him. That being said, if I were running the Mavericks, which we've made very clear on several episodes of the show, I am not because they do everything that I wouldn't do. I would have kept Quentin Grimes and I would have gotten off of some other money and made re-signing him a priority. Because if you think about that team, when they get Kyrie back, if they also had Quentin Grimes, no D'Angelo Russell, I guess that would have been a way for them to avoid some of these hard cap issues. I just feel a lot better about them. They're a lot more balanced. So, yeah, that was a debacle of a trade for Nico Harrison. It's just that the other trade he made that week was so much worse that we totally ignored it. So, you're right. That was a very stealthy, bad trade. Do you have any others for this category? Or do you want to move on?
I think we could move on because that trade is actually part of the next category.
In your next one. So we're in the second to last category here. Role player trade of the year. Third place for me, they obviously no longer have him, but the Lakers trading for Dorian Finney-Smith, giving up D'Angelo Russell, Maxwell Lewis, and a bunch of second round picks. They did not have to give up a first rounder. That is kind of the trade that turned the Lakers season around. The Luka trade was obviously much more publicized, but the moment the Lakers got Dorian Finney-Smith was the moment they turned from like an uninspiring, older 500-ish team into a team that ultimately grew into the number 3 seed. He obviously allowed them to play without a center in the regular season after they traded Anthony Davis because he was so good at defending bigger forwards and sometimes centers. Obviously didn't pan out in the playoffs, but Dorian Finney-Smith was everything the Lakers needed, obviously on a high-profile winning team. That was a great midseason trade. They just didn't ultimately keep him, which is, I think they probably would have come in third place here either way. But still, like that was a under-the-radar, good, solid role player trade.
No, he completely turned their season around. Yes, the Luka trade also did too, but they were like all right before they did that trade to turn the negative that was D'Angelo Russell into a plus and minus monster in Dorian Finney-Smith. Then everything started to go upwards where the team that had Anthony Davis, people were starting to speculate, well, maybe this team could make another run again. AD's playing really well. LeBron's playing really well. Dorian Finney-Smith fits perfectly. Austin Reeves at the point is working out better than expected. So just in that context alone, it was a great trade. And for those listeners, who've listened to us in June, we've bemoaned how much losing Dorian Finney-Smith in the fashion they did. I think makes the Lakers, at least me, I think the Lakers are a worse team than last year. I could be proven wrong. We'll see. But just like to further add to how much I like the acquisition of Dorian Finney-Smith for the Lakers, I like I've been pretty critical, equally as critical for them losing him. That's how important I think he is to them.
Yeah, I'm uncertain if I'm going to say they're better or worse than last year. LeBron's injury is obviously a big part of that. So I had started to get pretty optimistic about the Lakers until LeBron got hurt. Now we'll kind of see. Second place we just talked about, Quentin Grimes to the 76ers. Ironically, he was not a role player for them last year. He
Yeah,
was like bordering on a star for them because he was the only guy on the team that could score while they were tanking. He got the ultimate seal of approval, which was getting shut down late in the year because he was too good and he was winning them too many games. But I
yeah,
am personally in the camp that a lot of what Quentin Grimes did for the Sixers last year was real. I think like these were hard shots that he was making. It wasn't just a hot shooting stretch. He was creating these looks for himself. He was great in pick and roll. He was great in isolation. I'm going to be very interested this season to see how, if at all, Philly like actually takes advantage of that growth as opposed to just making him a 3-and-D player like he was with the Knicks. And ultimately, if it doesn't pan out in Philly, he becomes a very interesting unrestricted free agent next year because he has shown that there's so much more to his game than what we thought was the case in New York. So, very
yeah.
good trade for Philly. We'll see how it pans
And
out long term.
and just quickly about the Quinn and Grimes negotiations. Clearly, the Sixers they utilized the full extent of the leverage where they didn't make him an offer until the week of his the deadline of the qualifying offer, and the offers were like like flat out disrespectful. It seems, but so clearly Quentin Grimes is worth more than the qualifying offer, but like this the how far apart both sides are where Quentin Grimes wants something like in the $20 million range. I think we need to see a little bit more because the idea of the Sixers bringing in Quentin Grimes, especially last season, this was before they got VJ Edgecombe, was that he would be the perfect fit starter, fourth or fifth option on a team featuring Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George. Uh, so ideally, I think you want Quentin Grimes for the player he is to have a much smaller usage. And even though he showed he can do more than that, for a guy in that role, you probably want to get him something like around the mid level or something slightly above that. Now with VJ Edgecombe, that kind of complicates things a little bit. It seems like he's going to be starting. I'm sure they could make that all star. They could play a little smaller.
Jared McCain in the
but
mix here as well.
but just the theory, like even though Quentin Grimes showed he could be a little bit above, a little bit better than a role player, for all intents and purposes, the Sixers acquired him as a role player, like a very high end role player that could be like one of the like lower guys in the shot hierarchy in a closing lineup. In that regard, one of the best role players you could acquire in the past few years.
Yeah, I'm just it's a fascinating trade that we're gonna have to see play out over the year because like there's a version of this where Quentin Grimes is like, oh, he's just a perfect 3-and-D guy again. Plus he can do this stuff off the dribble. And Philly goes, wow, he's an essential role player. We have to do everything we can to keep him. And there's also a version of this where there's like bitterness on both sides and they want to play Jared McCain more and they have to play VJ a lot. So he doesn't play much, and then he's an unrestricted free agent and he's like leaving for somewhere else on a good value deal. So it's funny. It's a big win for the Sixers that may ultimately turn into a big loss for the Sixers. So we'll see how that plays out. Number one, this is, I think, the clear winner here. Won Oklahoma City a championship, Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. The Thunder do not beat the Nuggets without Alex Caruso. It is that simple. I am not just talking about him defending Jokic in game 7. I think we've kind of forgotten this now. Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams were not good in the Denver series. Now, we know Jalen Williams was dealing with an injury, and obviously Jokic is an impossible matchup for anybody, so I don't hold that against Chet. But there were just so many moments where Oklahoma City so badly needed a big play, and it was Alex Caruso coming up with it. He was, I think, frankly, the second most important player on the team in that series, and then he was important in the finals as well. So I think this is a no-brainer. This trade literally swung the championship last year. I think the Indiana Pacers would be hoisting a trophy right now if this trade had not happened. So, or I guess maybe the Nuggets, one of the two, depending on if Halliburton still got hurt. But that, yeah, it's an easy win for me in role player trade of the year. Do you object in any way?
No, I don't, and I got nothing else to add.
Yep, perfect trade. All right, we have saved the best for last, as the Oscars do. Trade of the year. Now we are going five places instead of three for this one. We have talked about both of our fifth place finishers. Yours was Danny Avdia, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I've talked
Mine,
about that. I think, yeah, I think there's still more
mine,
upside for the Blazers there.
mine was Jimmy Butler. We have talked about that. We can skip over it.
I'll
We
just
have
say
not.
that I'll just say why. It's because we have basically the same two through one through four.
Yes.
The only reason that trade didn't make the cut for me is because the Warriors gave Jimmy Butler that extension on top of it, which time and time again Jimmy Butler continues to defy age. In some regards, maybe even improving as he gets older, but either way, every time into his 30s keeps getting a max contract, I just feel a little queasy about it. I'm sure it'll probably work out, but yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is what if Jimmy takes a somewhat of a step back? That'll be a
So
problem.
my counter is that it's only a 2 year deal, so it's just not that harmful, and the benefit is obviously enormous. Plus, in a year, you can trade him as a big expiring contract with all of your picks if that's how this pans out. But anyway, we have talked about both of our fifth place finishers. We're not going to bother with them anymore. We have not talked really. I mean, you can assume who our number one is going to be. We've touched on it, but we have not talked at all about our number four, number three, number two. Let's start with number four because two and three are pretty connected. Number four, DeJounte Murray to the New Orleans Pelicans for Dyson Daniels, a 2025 first round pick, and a 2027 first round pick that looks pretty valuable right now. It is the lesser of the Pelicans and the Bucks, but it is top four protected. So basically, unless both the Pelicans and the Bucks are picking in the top four in 27, the Hawks will get a presumably pretty good pick. That trade, I mean, there have been more moves to it, obviously, but that trade was what launched the Hawks from like really depressing team that was looking at handing lottery picks to the Spurs from their own first Murray trade to very interesting Eastern Conference sleeper with a lot of longer term upside. Dyson Daniels wins most improved player, obviously was a defensive player of the year candidate. That pick in 2027 is very, very interesting. And then DeJounte Murray goes to New Orleans. He plays the first half of the year. I guess he misses some time early, but he plays a fair bit in the first half of the year. And it's some of the worst basketball of his life. He was terribly inefficient, was not the same defender that he was at his peak. Of course, he wasn't in San Antonio either, or he wasn't in Atlanta either, rather. So he was already playing badly. And then he tears his Achilles, which makes it significantly worse. He also delivers, like, it's kind of been forgotten now, an interview with some quotes about, like, when I was in New Orleans, I couldn't get training time on the table. I couldn't get court time. Like very basic, embarrassing things for an organization to have come out. That trade has just been an abject disaster for New Orleans and has basically started this renaissance for Atlanta. Just an absolutely incredible trade for the Hawks. I mean, if this wasn't such a busy trade year, this could have been number one in other seasons.
And just forget about the picks for a second. I just turning DeJounte Murray into Dyson Daniels, I think that is still a huge victory for the Hawks because he was exactly the type of player they were hoping to get originally when they got DeJounte Murray. So I feel like that swap alone really turned the Hawks outlook around. And plus they recouped some of those picks that they sent out. And like, we knew that the Hawks were going to trade one of Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, and it's probably always going to be DeJounte Murray. But imagine if the Hawks did any other trade, like if they did anything else that did not involve them getting Dyson Daniels. I think there's a very strong chance that their outlook is still as depressing as it was prior to making that trade. So they got exactly the trade that they needed. Just completely flipped their outlook.
There were real ripple effects to that too, where like Trae Young spent this offseason recruiting Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard because like he feels better about their future as well. If they have another really depressing season with DeJounte, or they just trade DeJounte for draft picks, we're frankly probably talking about a Trae Young trade right now that didn't ultimately happen. It totally changed the entire vibe of the organization. They now have like a version of the team that you need to have around Trae Young, where they have all of these big defensive wings. Risa Shea in there, obviously, Jalen Johnson, who I frankly think is the best player on the team. Porzingis protects the lack of shooting in those wings by being a great shooting center. I think like this is the prototype of the kind of team you want to have around Trae Young. We'll see how successful they are. We'll see how the negotiations go for a possible extension for Trae Young. But whether Trae is there or not, Dyson Daniels is going to be a fixture in Atlanta for a long time. I will see what his contract turns out to be, but I would be comfortable paying him quite a bit. So just a great, great trade for Atlanta there. Do you have anything you want to add before we move on to number 3 and number 2?
Nope. Let's move on.
So we actually had these two flipped, and I'm open-minded about the placement here, but they're very connected. So my second place is the Brooklyn Nets trading Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks for 5 first-round picks and 1 first-round swap. My third place is the Houston Rockets trading Brooklyn back their unprotected picks in 25 and 26, one through swap, one through an outright pick. And in exchange, they get all of those Suns picks and a Maverick pick. They clean up basically in that. So I had the Rockets component in third and the Nets component in second. You had them flipped. Why don't you make your argument for why the Rockets side is more significant?
So the Rockets, they just to remind everyone of the context, they had control of the Nets draft as part of the blanket. It's a Harden trade. The Nets traded 3 firsts and 4 swaps to get James Harden back in 2021. And with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving leaving and them starting to look pretty bad as early as 2023, the Nets they needed to do something because they were in a position where they were going to be bad and not get their own, not benefit from having their own picks. And that happened really badly in 2024 when the Rockets got the 3rd overall pick courtesy of the Nets. And something needed to change from the Nets end because they weren't going to get any superstars in the next year or so. And they needed to rebuild realistically, get some an influx of young talent in. So so the Rockets, first of all, I think the Nets, this is kind of more win-win than I think people are giving it credit for.
Well, it really depends on what happens in the lottery this year, right?
Yeah.
Because if the Nets pick number 1 in 2026, they are thrilled with how this trade went.
Right,
if they pick number 8 again, then they obviously aren't.
I just think there's too much revisionist history, like when looking at this, where people are criticizing the Nets for doing it because you couldn't have really predicted. Like I'm sure you could have predicted. I would have predicted the Suns were going to underachieve. I couldn't have gone as far to say that they could have potentially been in the lottery, being 9th or 10th and knowing how chaotic the lottery is, potentially jump to the top 4. I think if you're the Nets, you're back in 2024 and you're about to do this trade, I still think that's the safer route to take looking back. So just because things went so wrong for the Suns, I don't think you could use that against the Nets. And a lot of people are doing it. It's a lot of stuff that you can't really accurately predict. So I think the Nets were right to do this trade. Just the safer route, get control of your picks. Ultimately, the thing that did them was overachieving in the beginning of last year. That got them down to 9th or wherever they selected 8th. And a big part of that was Dennis Schroeder. He was playing out of his mind. Now they don't have a veteran guard right now. They're going to be counting on rookies to lead the way. And I know there's the people think with Jordy Fernandez that they're going to have a slight overachievement again. I think the point guard position is so bad right now that I don't think that's going to happen. I feel pretty comfortable that the Nets are going to have one of the top three, if not top two, worst records in the league. So because of that, so that's for the net side of it. I think for the Rockets, it just made total sense for in the short term to get control of those Suns picks because that just puts so much leverage against the Suns. And it resulted in them getting Kevin Durant for just one of those picks. They still have two of those left. Like they can get so much just for one of those again.
And they got, by the way, they gave the worst of those 3 picks, I think. Even though it was number 10, I would rather have the 27 and 29 picks than number 10 and 25.
So I think overall, like the Rockets are in the same position. If they kept the Nets pick, they probably could have gotten the same trade done for Kevin Durant and whatever other deals they would have done. The difference is they got like an extra first and I think an extra swap. They got like the volume wise, they benefited from it. So quality of the picks remained the same, but they got a little more volume. So I think that works really well for both teams. I like it a slightly more than the Mikal Bridges trade in that sense. I think it was pretty beneficial. Maybe I should have had that in my beneficial trades. I just didn't think of it.
Okay. So there are a couple things I want to touch on here. Yes, the Nets overachieved, and yes, that is why their pick was where it was. It was their fault that they overachieved because the moment they made this trade, there's no excuse for Dennis Schroeder to still be on the team. There's no excuse for Cam Johnson to still be on the team. There's no excuse for Nick Claxton to still be on the team. If you are committing to this, if you are not only saying we're going to tank, if you are trading a premium in terms of value to regain control of your own picks, you have to clear the decks entirely. They mismanaged the 2024 offseason, and that's why they picked number 8. If they had lost 3 more games, they would have been in the Philadelphia slot in the lottery and would have therefore picked 3rd. Now, butterfly effect, blah, blah, blah. But if you're making this trade, it is on you to make sure that you have the worst roster in the NBA, which they didn't do. Now, the Cam Johnson trade they ultimately made with Denver was a good one. I think getting Denver's 32 pick was very, very valuable. They just acted too late, and they lost one of 2 crucial tanking years, and that's another very important part of this. We haven't talked about what the Rockets didn't give up, which is control of Brooklyn's pick in 2027. So what the Rockets did here that was quietly very, very sneaky, very, very smart, was they incentivized the Nets to get really, really bad, but they controlled the pick that immediately came after that incentive window closed. So basically they're telling the Nets, go be as bad as you want in 2026. We are betting that you won't be able to get good again in 2027. We'll see how that goes. But on top of all of the Suns picks and the Mavericks picks that they got, they also strengthened the value of the 2027 pick that they already had. Now, all of this being said, ironically, at the time, I thought the Rockets were crazy to make this trade because I thought, and there was reporting at the time from the Nets side saying, we would not have made the Mikal Bridges trade if we knew we didn't have this one lined up. If I were the Rockets at the time, I would have said to the Nets, we're calling your bluff. We think you're going to make this trade either way because you're getting 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and that's what we have to talk about next. Rudy Gobert, that trade gets talked about a lot as an all-time overpay. Now, Minnesota making back-to-back conference finals has maybe changed the tune on that a little bit. Mikal Bridges has never won Defensive Player of the Year. He's never made an all-star team. He's never been all-NBA. These are all things that Rudy Gobert had accomplished before his trade. I understand the logic for the Knicks. At the time, I was in favor of that trade for the Knicks. But the Nets probably made the best high-end role player trade in NBA history. 5 unprotected first-round picks for a single non-all-star, some of which, by the way, 2031 Knicks, when this team is very expensive and frankly getting older, that's a very, very good pick. I think I disagree ultimately with hindsight. At the time, I was fully in favor of what they did. With hindsight, I wish they would have just kept the Suns picks and said, we are going to be we're we're gonna do the Kenny Atkinson basic thing, basically, where we don't have our picks and we're gonna try to go 500, and then we're gonna have all of these future picks from the Suns and the Mavericks and the Knicks, and we're just gonna like talk to us again in 3 years. I kind of wish that's what they would have done. At the time, I thought they made a brilliant move. And even in hindsight, even with the mistake that came afterward, which was not tanking hard enough, having those Knicks picks, I think, is just a transformational trade for them potentially. So that is, I think these are both fascinating trades, and we're probably going to have to revisit them every 6 months, every year for the foreseeable future. It changed the Rockets, it changed the Nets, it changed the Knicks. It was just, it's a very rare trade to not involve a star to be this impactful. That being said, we just spent 10 minutes or however long talking about a trade that didn't involve a star. Number one, again, you'll be shocked to hear Luka Doncic to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and the 2029 first round pick. Everything that could conceivably be said about this trade has been said. I'll just
hold on a
ask you,
second.
like,
Just really quick, I just want to just close on the Nets trades where we're splitting hairs on like which one we like a little more. Yeah, but ultimately they're very much intertwined. They're kind of like almost one trade. They're basically one trade, very much like a three-teamer in a way, even though it was two separate trades. I do want to comment on, yeah, I do think that there is still a lot of upside in those later Knicks picks. Anything can happen in the league. Teams like injuries can really pile up, and I think this Knicks team, their window is a lot shorter than I think it's going to be a lot shorter than people are anticipating. Where as soon as they made that cat trade, you and I both pretty much envisioned they have like a 4-year window, but really like the first 2 years, last season being one of them, as their best chance to win a championship. This season's going to be their best chance to win a championship. After that, we'll see how these guys do. Like they're deceivingly older. This group's deceivingly older than you might think. Like I believe Brunson and Mikal Bridges both just turned 29. I think Cat's also already 29. Like these guys are in their prime. So who knows how long this core will play this well. And I do think there's still a lot of upside. I think, especially, they got 5 picks. I think people are looking at already 2 of those have conveyed, and they ended up being low first round picks in the draft that just happened. They're looking pretty down on that trade on the Nets end. Time will tell. I still think there's a very strong possibility that it might end up being like a very, very mutually beneficial one where maybe the Knicks win the title or at least get to the finals, and the Nets could maybe come out of this late in the later years with a top 7-8 pick or something. We'll see. We'll see how things pan out for the Knicks. All right. Yes. Number one, Luka for. Oh.
No, we can. I don't have anything else I have to add about the Knicks trade. We covered everything. I just want to know, because I don't know if you had been podcasting yet at the time. How did you find out about the Luka trade? Like, what was your reaction?
I was at home. It was, I believe, like 8 or 9 p.m. Pacific time. And I don't remember what I did. I want to, maybe my wife and I went to dinner or something, but I got back to my couch and I was like halfway through the newest Miyazaki documentary about the making of The Boy and the Heron. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
Have you seen the movie? List. You haven't seen the movie?
No, I haven't. No, but what was I gonna say? I just generally this off season, I have been watching a lot more movies like that I've had on the back burner for a long time, and I have a whole list, and it's on the list.
Oh, all right. Then we'll probably end up doing some cinema stuff along the way, because I am a huge cinephile. But yeah, I was watching a documentary about the making of The Boy and the Heron. And I think like I was maybe 3/4 of the way down. I was really into it. Very emotional stuff about who the characters in the movie are based on. And then all of a sudden I see Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis. I just tell my wife I gotta go. I go upstairs, and I'm not even like doing my normal thing where I'm doing the cap stuff. I'm just it just didn't seem right. I think it took me 30 minutes until my brain really started to not only believe it, but actually start processing what this means. So that was my experience. What was yours?
So the Knicks had played the Lakers that night, and I watched into the third quarter, but I had some things I'd wanted to do the next morning. Shocker, I didn't get to do them. So I went to bed relatively early. It was like maybe like, I don't know, 9 or 10 on the East Coast, something like that. And I don't think much of it. I go to bed. I wake up at like 6 the next morning and I have 37 text messages. And the top one at 5:37 in the morning is from my brother-in-law. My sister was pregnant at the time. So for a brief second, I look and I see who the text is from and I see the time and I'm like, "Wait, is my sister okay?" Then I open the text and it says, "I hope you didn't have too crazy a night with the most insane NBA trade in history," or whatever. And I'm like, "Most insane trade? Like, what's he talking about? Like, did Jimmy get traded somewhere weird? Like, could it have been Giannis? Like, what
We
happened?"
were on
Then
standby for De'Aaron Fox at that time.
De'Aaron Fox, it might have been like I was running through the possibilities in my head of like, what could it have possibly been? And then I opened Twitter to check, and I'm like, I somehow didn't go crazy enough. So I think I found out at around like 6 in the morning, and I must have just written for like the next 18 straight hours, something like that, because we got De'Aaron Fox that night. So I think I wrote about Luca for 12, 14 hours, and then the Fox trade comes in, and I just immediately pivot into writing about that. It's the most
Yeah.
unbelievable transactional piece of sports news I have ever experienced in my entire life in any sport, period. I have to imagine that's almost everybody's experience. So, I mean, just looking at this, it was the probably like it saved the Lakers from a slow and gradual decline. I'm not going to say into irrelevance because they would have figured something out and somebody would have wanted to go there. But LeBron obviously aging into his 40s. I think Anthony Davis is down to his last few years as like an A1 level star. They were fading pretty quickly, and the Jazz had that 2027 Laker pick that was looking like potentially pretty high upside. You know, LeBron older, AD with the injury risk, like things were looking kind of bleak for the Lakers. And all of a sudden, they've been rescued by this trade out of nowhere that gives them one of the four best players in the NBA for 30 or 40 cents on the dollar, something like that. He's 26 years old. The hope is that he can be their guy for a decade. Like, I don't know what to say about this from a basketball standpoint that hasn't been said. This is like one of the most significant trades in NBA history. It would be trade of the year in any trade or any year that I have ever covered the league. I don't know what else to add. Do you have anything to say?
Do you ever scroll on Twitter or maybe just somewhere on the internet and you're reading like a small paragraph where the words are either like not in the right order or they're kind of missing, but they're it's legible, but like it kind of hurts your brain to try to read it because it just doesn't flow. And then people comment on it saying like, "What is this? Like this is hurting my head reading this." Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if that's a good
Yeah,
description.
I know what you're
Like
talking about. I saw one of those like a week ago.
that's what I felt reading the Shams tweet. I just couldn't like even for the first 10 minutes like process what he is saying. It was like gibberish to me. That's how and it just broke my brain broke that night. I did my content and then I spent like the next an hour like at 2 a.m. just reading what everyone had to say about it because I just couldn't get enough of it.
It's
And
such a crazy trade that it spawned like a dozen separate conspiracies, right? There was they're trying to move the team to Vegas. There was all the Cooper Flag stuff that followed. Like, no, I'll just ask you this straight up. Like, hypothetically, I'm not validating the conspiracy. I'm just saying in a vacuum. Would you rather have Luka Doncic or Cooper Flag, Anthony Davis, Max Christie, the 2029 first? Like, what version of the Mavericks would you rather be?
I would rather be the Mavericks if they capitalize on Anthony Davis and turn him
Yeah.
into the picks they should have gotten. Because again, you and I both stressed out. We don't disagree with the decision to trade Luca. It's what they got back. A lot of people have
Well, I
pointed that
disagree
out.
with trading Luca, but I could have understood it if it had been like Luka to the Rockets for Amin Thompson, all of the Suns
Yeah.
picks, and like two or three other guys. Like, okay, I wouldn't have done it, but I would have understood it.
Yeah.
What they
That's
actually did
it's
was,
fair.
I've said this before, there are three layers of mistakes, right? Layer mistake number one is trading Luka Doncic. They shouldn't have done that. Layer number two is trading Luka Doncic to the Lakers when there were half a dozen teams that very immediately had more to trade. Layer number three, if you are going to trade with the Lakers, you have to get all of the picks. You have to get Austin Reeves. You have to get everything that they have, and they didn't. So it's several different types of mistakes all boiled into a single trade. They get bailed out to an extent with Cooper Flag. Again, we agree they should have, the moment they got Flag, they should have traded Davis and really capitalized on this gift from the basketball gods that they did not deserve and that I'm worried they're about to waste. So, I mean, it's a trade that it's like the closest analog I can come to, and it's not even close. It's like the James Harden trade from 2013 or whatever it was, in that it's the sort of trade that we are going to talk about and relitigate for the next decade. It's going to have so many tendrils across the league. It's an all-time NBA trade. It's an all-time trade in any different sport. I have nothing else to add. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I just want to add that there will be more to add. Even though we're now, what is it, 9, 10, 8, 9 months past the trade, we're still going to learn new stuff. I'm predicting that the Mavs are going to maybe tread 500. I think that their lack of creation is going to put them in play-in range. And I just don't think they're going to be good. It's going to be a very unsuccessful season, in which case there's going to be that possibility that the Mavs finally either fire Nico or he, like, quote unquote resigns. They part ways amicably, however you want, whatever language they use. And when that day happens, if and when that happens, we're going to learn a lot more about what came into the decision, but who were maybe some critics at the time who were against it. It's not going to be over for like a couple more years.
This is actually a good point of conversation. What more do you want to know? Because I personally have things. I think inevitably we're going, like, when this goes south, we're going to get the reporting that Jason Kidd was against it and they did it anyway. I don't know if I believe that, but I think we're going to get that at some point. Yeah, I think what it feels like to me, based on a lot of Tim McMahon's reporting about some of the other stuff that was going on in the organization, about how they, fired Casey Smith and all the people in the training staff, it feels almost ego driven to me, where Nico was like, I am going to remake this organization in my image. And it's not that he's actively thinking I'm going to work against the best interest of the team. It's that his primary focus was the best interest of Nico Harrison. That's how it
Yeah.
felt to me as an outsider. But we have now been talking for 2 hours. There you have it, the trade of the year, Luka Doncic to the Lakers. Who would have thunk it, right? That's going to do it for us today. But our plan moving forward, now that I'm an official co-host of this podcast, is we are going to try to do this once or twice a week. We don't have a fixed schedule, but the basic idea is going to be once earlier in the week and once later in the week. We do have another show planned for later this week. I'll just tell you the gimmick right off the top. We are going to do a draft of the players you would build a franchise around. We are going to go 1 to 30. We're doing the full league. It is going to be me and Yossi and a special guest I will not announce yet, but we are very excited to do that. We're very excited for a season full of podcasting and, hopefully beyond a season, a long, long time of podcasting. God knows we've been doing this dance for a long enough time. I'm glad we could finally make it official. Read me at CBS Sports, Sam Quinn CBS on Twitter. Yossi, anything you want to plug? Anything else you want to say?
Everyone, please subscribe to Third Apron. This show's only going to get better and better. I'm beyond excited that Sam's officially on board. It's going to be so much fun. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all the different platforms. Subscribe to Third Apron Substack. Follow us on Twitter, and we will be back with a lot more fun content.
I don't know if I'm the one who has to say goodbye because I've been hosting, but I'll say it officially here. So long, farewell. We'll see you at the end of the week.
Bye, everyone.